They took sand and made a computer out of it. Come on, there's got to be a God.
There's gotta be. Sand computer, gotta be a God.
And he's got to be good. With you, I'm like, I have no idea how frequencies and, I don't know how we're talking right now.
Ooh, I'm salivating just thinking about it. I'm hungry.
I'm just blown away.
She used to live with me in Waxahachie. We all used to be roommates. Jill, Melissa, and I all used to be roommates. And that was a really awesome season for maybe a year and a half or so. I don't know. It's just a really good time of us loving the Lord together and growing up a lot together. So the whole purpose of Grace and Truth podcast is to encourage, empower, equip young women to run to Jesus in life and just have a real, raw, authentic relationship with him. I want to help young women not just go to church, but to have a real relationship with Christ, because that's what I was missing out on. And that's what I didn't have. So basically, I just want this to be a platform to be what I needed when I was 12, 13, 14, all the way up to 18. I needed some serious mentorship and leadership in my life at that point that I just didn't have. And I was lost with a capital L. I was so broken and had such an identity crisis going on. But the thing was, I was a Christian. Before, I spent 7 years just off down a pretty bad path. I was a Christian. I was praying. I was going to church camp, and my family was going to church. So I just didn't have really deep roots in a real relationship with Jesus. And so I want to get into that topic today. We're going to talk about all kinds of stuff on this podcast. But I wanted to start with something really foundational, because I feel like for me, this is where my life changed. And this is where I started really living for God. And this is where he rescued me. It was when I realized, oh my gosh, he actually does have my back. He is good. And I want to follow him because he's good. So that's the topic I want to start on. But before we even go there, okay, this podcast is brought to you in part by, no, I'm just kidding. I have no paid sponsorships. But what you should consider is letting me sell your product for you, okay? Because I have a gift. You need Cody Brook in your life to help you share with people why they need your product. So just keep that in mind. Also, please ignore this. Like many things with starting this podcast, is just not okay. Also, before we get into this conversation, I I have a very important question. I need to know y'all's opinion on what is the best way to eat a hot dog. What's the best? Now take some time to think about it, because this is a serious question. What is the best way to eat a hot dog? I had a
With your
conversation
mouth.
this
I thought
past
there was
week
only
with.
one way to eat a hot dog. I didn't know there was
this is
multiple ways to eat a hot dog.
this.
Right.
You chew it. See,
I didn't
y'all
think there
need
was
some culinary.
different ways to eat a hot dog. Maybe with a fork and a knife, but who's got time for that when you're walking,
How many times do you actually eat a hot dog while you're walking? Is that a normal thing for you to do? We don't live in New York. Shoot, we're Southern people. We don't walk and eat hot dogs.
You go to carnival? If you go to the carnival, you can eat a hot dog. Walking.
I don't know. I'm a corn dog person at that point, so.
That too.
Okay, so.
But all a corn dog is a hot dog wrapped up in corn.
But it's fried.
Oh, man.
It's fried.
That's true.
And it's conveniently wrapped.
Okay, so how many ways can you eat a hot dog? I didn't know this. This is new knowledge to me.
Okay, let me set some context here, because both of y'all's minds just went to the same place, and it's not even what I'm talking about. I just had a conversation with someone last week who said the best way to eat a hot dog was to put it on the grill. You grill it, And while it's on the grill, when it's almost ready, you get a tortilla and you grill the tortilla a little bit on both sides to where it gets, and then you put the hot dog in the tortilla and you roll it up, and you keep doing that on the grill for a little bit while it's in the tortilla, so it makes it crispy, and it like crispifies the tortilla around the hot dog, and you put whatever you want in it. And I was very intrigued by this. And they said once you do this, you will never eat a hot dog the same way again. And I kind of believe him. So I was just curious what y'all's opinions were.
Oh.
Are you a ketchup
Okay, yeah,
person? Are you, some people put mayonnaise on their hot dogs. Some people, like in Costa Rica, where Jill's at, they put chips and carrots and all kinds of stuff on there.
Which is really good.
Yeah, I like.
I'm a fan of that. I like putting crunchy chips on sandwiches.
I like a little bit of like
And hot dogs.
everything.
Go
So it
ahead, sorry.
depends on what kind of mood I'm in. Because I do like my classic like ketchup with mustard and onions and relish. And it's like, it just depends on what kind of mood. I might add some potato chips or some carrots like they do in Costa Rica. But I mean, my classic is going to be like, it could be chili. But it's really going to be ketchup and mustard for sure if it's available.
Oh, yeah.
Since moving up here in North, for me, I love the Chicago dog, like the stuff that they put, like, I'm not even sure what all goes on there, but they got like a pepper, a full-size green pepper on there. Ooh, I'm salivating just thinking about it. I'm hungry. You got a large pickle, and you got some other stuff in there, and it's so good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I went
Chili
to Chicago.
dogs, classic chili dogs.
Yes, chili dogs with some cheese, some shredded cheese.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
man.
I went to Chicago for the first time with Melissa several months ago. It's been like a year ago. I think we have some kind of lag or interruption. That's okay. But I ate a Chicago dog, which I always thought looked disgusting because, you know, the Sonics here in Texas, they make Chicago dogs. And I always thought that looks disgusting. And we go to Chicago and I try this thing, and it was legitimately the best hot dog I've ever had. To the point where you got to do your hand like this, you know?
Yeah. And we had got one and we shared it and we both regretted it. We was like, man, we should have got our own.
Yeah. I still think about that.
Good.
Literally, I still think to myself, I wish I could go back and relive that memory and choose to get a whole Chicago dog instead of a half of one.
Me too.
Okay. That was fun. Best way to eat a hot dog. Not that we actually made any kind of conclusion there, but I think a Chicago dog is pretty at the top of the list. But also the Texas version of the chili and cheese, I think, is right there too. That yep. Okay. Here we go. I wish I had some like fancy music. Hold up. Tell me if y'all can hear this. We might have some fancy music. Can you hear this?
Nope.
Nope, I can't hear it either, so never mind. It was worth a try. I was going to try to give us some fancy music, but I'm still figuring this dang software out. Ugh. Okay, starting this podcast has been one of the most challenging things ever. I keep thinking, oh, this is going to be easy, and I run into problems literally around every corner, which is why this is not live right now. Okay, the goodness of God. How do you know that God is good? When you think about God being good, with all the craziness going on in the world, bad stuff that you've been through, I know some of y'all's testimony personally, and I know y'all been through some rough stuff, and so have I. And so for other people out there, especially these young women, at what point in your lives was it clear to you that even with negative things happening in the world, that God was in fact a good God. Not everybody all at once.
Hmm.
I'll start. I'm just tired of hearing my own voice already. So I got these headphones just like making me hear my own voice so much. Oh, that's better. Oh, yay. They have a noise cancellation. Oh, that's so much better. Maybe I should take one of them off of my. I don't know. We'll figure out the best way to do this. So for me, um, it was when I was in college. It was my sophomore year of college. I was at Sul Ross State the year previous to that. Sul Ross State is out in Alpine, Texas, way west, like close to El Paso. And I had failed out of my dream school the year before. I was at Texas A&M. Always wanted to go to Texas A&M. I got in, and I was a very distracted young woman that first year. I was a biomedical science major, so it was a very, very challenging freshman year. It was the most difficult thing I had ever done. And I had already been on a path of like making a lot of really dumb decisions, and just prioritizing stupid stuff in my life. It was more important to me to like find friends and fit in and hang out and all of that than it was to actually succeed, like set real goals and succeed at them. So I absolutely loved school, but I failed out because I was not disciplined and I was not prioritizing being a student. And there just really wasn't room for that in that program. So I had to go somewhere else. And I went out to Sul Ross. And that failing out was a huge wake up call for me because I'm not as most of my life I've been an A student and very academically driven. And so for me to fail out was like, okay, this isn't me. But the problem was in high school, I had never experienced any true consequences for my decisions, my actions. So that was the first time in my life that I was genuinely humbled and was like, oh, important things will be taken away from me if I don't get my act together. And so uh that year that I was at Sul Ross, my sophomore year of college, I started going to church again and I just started praying again. And I really expected that God was going to meet me with a lot of judgment. You know, if a parent was upset at you and they're like, well, you shouldn't have done this and stupid, see, you earned this. And I just thought it was going to be a lot of judgment and
Yes.
shame. And he was so encouraging to me, and he never brought up any of the poor decisions I'd made. He never brought up all the times that I like gave up on him. He just started loving on me. And I just felt like he was so happy that his daughter was like returning to him. And he was the most encouraging, he became the most encouraging person, you know, in my life. He was just very loving, he was very encouraging, very uplifting, and every single time I expected him to tell me how disappointed he was, uh he never did that. He always did the opposite. And that blew my mind. And that was the time for me when I really was like, okay, he genuinely has my back and I want to follow him.
Hmm.
For me, it was in a similar low point, just like CB. It was whenever I was going through healing for everything in my past, and during that process of discovery, I began to believe that he wasn't good. But then the Lord said that He was going to heal me, and I actually laughed in His face because I was like,
No, you
"Yeah,
ain't.
yeah." But then He actually did. He actually did, and that was very eye opening about who He is and His goodness, and not only that, some things that he has told me, promises that He has declared over my life. I'm literally walking in now and continue to walk in those things. because he's a God of justice. I think whenever we start talking about God's goodness, we also start talking about his other characteristics, like the fact that he's a God of justice and righteousness and mercy. Because CB, even when she said, like, I was expecting him to come down on me, but he didn't, that was his mercy. But his mercy is the extension of his personality, which is his goodness. And so, yeah, I think that was an eye opening moment for me when I first discovered his goodness, and I'm still discovering his goodness on levels. This home that I'm in right now, this apartment, like, it was his goodness because I never had a place of my own, and it was his goodness, his show of goodness, and people that he bring in my life is a show of his goodness. So I'm still discovering it, but that was probably when it really hit me. And wow, he's good, and he's the type of God that will pay you back for the evil. Because the word says, like, he pays you back double for your former trouble, and he's that kind of God because he's justice and he's good.
That's so good. I love that. I love that being real about that. I laughed in God's face whenever he said, Melissa, I'm going to heal you. And you're like, ha, we'll see. Yeah, that's good. That's real. That's a real part. That's a real
Yeah,
part of
I did
relationship with
that.
God. It's not always like,
Yeah,
it's like whenever he says something and you don't always trust him in the beginning. And that's natural because he's God and he says some pretty miraculous things sometimes. And it's hard for us to understand how is that going to be possible or
yeah,
how you're going to do that. So that's cool.
yeah. And even when we're faithless, like, he's faithful because he can't deny himself. For him to line up with our belief is him denying himself.
Yep, exactly. That's a deep word right there. For him to line up with our beliefs is for him to deny himself. Like we got to be the ones that level up and align our hearts with him and his word. That's so good. Jill, you got some stuff you want to share? This doesn't have to be all organized like class. You can just talk whenever you feel like you got something you want to say. Oh, she's gone.
We lost her.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what do you think if we were going to talk about some of the specific reasons why people end up thinking, and I know a lot of people feel this way, and I've felt this way at one point. Well, if there is a God, he's not good. He ain't good. If there is one up there, I'm not convinced that there is a God, but even if there is, he's not good, because of certain things they've experienced. So, what do you think are some of the things that make people feel or seem like, yeah, even if there was a God, he is not a good one?
The bad things that happen. Like, if God is sovereign and God is good, then why does all these bad things
Mm-hmm.
happen? Either one, he's sovereign but he's not good, or two, he's good but he's not sovereign. Like,
Right.
I think that's the dilemma. Like, why does he allow these bad things to happen if he's
Mm-hmm.
good? And then that's getting into other
Yeah.
stuff, like the fall of humanity and sin and free will, and that gets into all this other kind of stuff. So I don't think I think we often judge his goodness based on circumstances, like the circumstances in our life,
Yeah.
and how we view what goodness
Mm-hmm.
is. Our view of goodness probably isn't the
Yeah.
same of God's view of goodness. You know what I mean? Like, a parent's view of goodness is probably not the same as a child's view of goodness. The parent
Mm-hmm.
could be doing something that's good for the child, that the child in that very moment think, oh, the parent hates me or they're just ruining my life and la 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 la. But in reality, the parent loves
Yeah.
the child and is doing that thing which is good for the
Mm-hmm.
child. So also we have to look at what's good, like what's our definition of
Yeah.
good.
Uh, exactly. I think what you touched on is huge. Like, if God is sovereign, if He is in control of everything, then why would bad things take place? Because if I was God and I was in control, I wouldn't let this happen. That's such a huge one. And this is where I really love to have the conversation. I get asked this question a lot by younger people in the church. Where they talk about this. Like, why would God allow X, Y, or Z to happen? Whether it's abuse, um, child sex trafficking, terrorism. I know family members who've struggled with someone that they lost, and they couldn't get their mind wrapped, like it was a young death, like a teenager, and they couldn't get their mind wrapped around why God would take that person. And I get questions around this a lot. And one thing that I started to pray about this, because I was confused with it for a long time. I didn't understand it, but then I started to think about love, and I started to the closer I got with Christ, the more I realized this is if this is really about a relationship with Him, then love is the highest goal, which is something that Paul says in First Corinthians, I think chapter 12, where he says, like, love be your highest goal. And love is the highest goal of what we have with God. And in order to have a real relationship, in order to have a like love, there has to be choice. There's Jill Pickle. Also,
Yeah, yeah.
if you do not like the nickname Jill Pickle, there's also Jilly Bean and uh what are the other ones? Dang, my mind is going blank. Jill Pickle, Jilly Bean,
There's a
Peanut
lot.
Butter Jelly.
Oh god.
But I tend to, she's like, "Oh, you put me out there, girl." But I tend to like Jill Pickle the most. I just honestly sometimes when I go to introduce you, I'm like, "This is my friend Jill," and I want to say Jill Pickle because I say it so often and it's just like your last name. But then I refrain from doing that, and I'm like, "Oh yeah, her last name is Berry, not Pickle." So, anywho, um, Joe, we're just talking about. Well, I'll just keep talking. So, I I think I discovered there was a point where I discovered that we could not have love, we could not have a relationship if God had not given us the gift of free will. If we didn't have the ability to choose, the only other option is basically being little robots down here that He's forcing our will. He's forcing us to do X, Y, or Z. And then if that was the case, what is the purpose of all of this? You know, unless He was going to create beings that could freely choose Him, that could freely choose a relationship with Him, what is the point? What's the point? Think about it. If you're a parent and you have kids, if they are legitimately forced to love you because it's embedded in them, they're a robot, they have no choice, is that really going to be meaningful to you? Is that love? Is that a real relationship? If that child is like inherently programmed to just do what you ask them to do and honor you and respect you and want to be in a relationship with you, does it even mean anything? You know, but when your child grows up and they develop their ability to choose, and they choose to be in relationship with you, they choose to love you, they choose to honor you. Come on, man. That's why it's special. That's why it means so much, because your child could do whatever they want. And I think that's why it's so rewarding for parents too, whenever their kids choose to do the right things. They make wise decisions because they have the freedom to choose not unwise things. They have the freedom to choose whatever they want. So when they raise their children with certain values and a certain foundation so that their kids actually make good decisions, that's got to be one of the most, I'm not a mom, but that just has to be one of the most rewarding things to experience. That to me is true purpose and true meaning. And without that, I don't see how there could be a purpose in this life, if that makes any sense.
Is it my turn?
Yeah, so Jill, we were just talking about yeah, we were just talking about things that make people feel like God is not good. Like, what are some of those things? And then we kind of, the conversation just sort of spiraled from there. But yeah, talk to us about your story.
So I mean, I'll get started with, how when I started to realize like God was good. I've been a Christian, I would say, all my life. Came to Christ when I was 4 or 5 years old, brought up in the church. But it was a lot of rules. It was a lot of, do's and don'ts. And so I always had this like mindset of God being on this judge stand with a gavel in his hand. And, if I was gonna do anything, it had to be either right or wrong. And for me, it was just about a lot of rules, a lot of do's and don'ts, and a lot of performance.
Mm-hmm.
And I look back at it now and I'm like, man, and I'm still trying to break a lot of the cycle of performance that just was embedded in me. But when I think it was really when I was going through my divorce, and man, I was fighting for my marriage in the spirit, and there were things I didn't know about God. And when he started to reveal himself to me in new ways, and it became more about breaking free from my hurts and habits and hang-ups from the past, and going through healing, and like the divorce was just the little thing on the spectrum. Man, I began to like ask him questions like, God, where were you in this situation in my past? And he would show me like, this is where I was in that moment, and this is what I was doing here, and this is why I was doing this. And so he began to really reveal himself to me in a new way. And I just remember like looking at how he had aligned everything in my life for just that moment in time to be with him and to really just get to know him in the deep and dark secret places. And man, that's just one way. Like you said earlier, like there's so many testimonies and so many different ways I could tell you, like where I see God is so good in my life and those people around me. But that's really where it began with me was, I think I was 28 years old. So hasn't only been but 5 years. Like I knew God was good, but I wasn't like, oh my gosh, like God is good.
He's really amazing. Yeah.
So, and trials and tribulations, he said that we're going to have those. And I just remember going through that season like angry about it, because I was like, I thought I was following your voice, Lord. And he was like, yeah, you were. And I was leading you right here to this moment. Yeah. So, and it's been, I would say downhill ever since, but it's really been uphill ever since. And man, just God's been so good. But I think to get into where you guys were leaving off, I think where people misunderstand God is we have this performance thing, like I was talking about, is if we do this, then God will do this.
Yep.
I don't know if you guys touched on all that, but it happened in my life. And it was like, God, if I followed your voice and if I did all these right things, then you would bring me the man of my dreams, or you would give me the perfect family.
Yes. Preach.
Yes. And the white picket fence, we have this American dream of a white picket fence. and a little doggy. I wish I had a
Yeah.
wiener dog in the yard, but I mean, if we were honest, like I had some of those things when I was married, but I was miserable to an extent because God was not really, truly the focus and the center and the relationship
Amen.
with Him. And so He gives us a wake-up call, but it's actually out of His mercy and grace. But I think where people really miss the boat is that once we start to really follow the Lord and we sell out and we're like, I'm sold out Christian, that we think it's going to be like a bed of
Yep.
roses and sweet smelling perfume. And there is that time, and it's a beautiful relationship that you cultivate, but it is, it can be an uphill climb too,
It's not for the faint of heart.
And I think something that you said, Jill, that really jumped out at me just now. Something that you said that I just want to touch on real quick, regarding the goodness of the Lord. Like, every good and perfect thing comes from God, right? And so, literally, if He is goodness personified, like He is goodness personified, and every single good thing comes from God. You said, I was married, and in an extent, I had all those things that I dreamed about, but I was miserable because goodness wasn't at the center. He wasn't there. Like, He is what makes a circumstance good. He is goodness personified. So you could be in the worst possible situation, and if He's in the middle of it, it's good. Joy, everything that He brings to the table can transform this situation. Not necessarily always externally, but internally.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's why I say, like, what's our definition of good? Like, the way we see goodness is totally different, I think, than how He sees goodness. Because Jill was just saying, like, God, I thought I was following your voice. And He was like, well, you was. Well, He's good. So if He's good and He cannot be nothing than who He is, which is good, then what He had her doing must have been good.
Right.
And I think there's an element of mystery there that I think humans struggle with. There's just parts of God that we're not going to understand. Like, Jill may never know until she gets to heaven why the Lord had her walk down that path that was dark and heavy. He knew where she was going to go, but He knew what He wanted. And then also, like, it made me think about sin. It made me think about sin, like seeing God for who He is. When we see ourselves for who we really are and how much we don't deserve even the very breath that we breathe in, then you begin to understand, dang, He's so good. Because literally, I don't even deserve to even be alive right now, type of thing. And I think once we start to see Him for who He really is, once we start to see ourselves truly for who we are, then we see Him for who He really is.
Right. I agree.
I just gotta make a comment about Jill's. If y'all are watching on the video, okay, if y'all are tuning in on the YouTube, just be reminded that Jill's making the best out of her situation to be able to be on this with us. Like, she is okay. So tell us where you're at, Jill. You said you're in a clinic right now.
Yeah, so we're in a rural. I can't say that word, but
that is a hard word. Yes.
Let me rephrase. I'm in the middle of nowhere, Malawi, and we're in a tiny village where even the locals, when I'm like, "Oh yeah, we're in Agabu," and they're like, "Where?" Like, so we're out. But I'm actually, my room, where me and my roommate are sleeping, is in a clinic. There's a ministry here that has a clinic, and then they have a guest house, and we put most of the students and everybody in the guest house. But I get to sleep in a clinic that services about 30,000 people who depend upon this clinic. And so screaming babies at every hour of the night can happen.
The doors are really
it's interesting. Yeah, the doors are squeaky, but
Squeak.
It looks like bats
yes, there's
too.
bats flying around. I moved to the classroom, and usually there's about 4 bats like flying around the. So yeah, and
Oh
the
man.
I was like, those look like bats.
Batman, yeah. But it's the goodness.
Yeah, in Brazil we had
It's
bats.
the
It's the
goodness
goodness
of
of
God
God.
that we have signal. That I'm in the middle of nowhere with signal.
Yes.
So
It's so true
yeah.
because I really wanted Melissa and Jill to be, I wanted this to be a conversation between us. And I kept fretting over Jill not being able to do this with us because she was going to be in the bushes somewhere in Africa. So yes, this is a blessing. I will take it. So even though her signal is going in and out, we drop her sometimes. It's still really cool that she's able to be with us. And they're on solar energy there, which is why she's not like got the light on just in the light. So are you working off a flashlight?
I gotta. Well, the light is on. You just can't see it, but I've got a
Oh.
flashlight that's giving me a little extra glow here.
Okay.
Oh, there's a bat.
She got the bats going.
Oh, I love you
Your
guys.
bat friends, they trying to be in on the conversation too
Oh
I used
bad.
to
man.
be terrified of
Perfect.
bats, and then I came here.
Not
And
no
now you
more.
speak their language. They come sit on your shoulder and they're like, "Yo, what's up, Jill?"
No. Oh
Oh
man.
man,
But
that's
yeah.
funny. So yes, I totally agree. And that was actually one of the main things that I was gonna say, Melissa, what you were touching on, just what you left off on. Like I wanted to touch on, like for me, I had this realization that sin has consequences, and sin is basically everything that's apart from God, that's separated from God. It's the opposite of God's will, his direction, his ways. It's the opposite of him. And
Of
and
good.
so when people live in sin, and the Bible says that sin is going to create death and destruction. When sin starts as a little seed and it grows and grows, it the fruit of sin is death and destruction. And so that's really why we see the destruction in the world that we see, is because it is a fruit of separation from God. And so that comment that you made about how God, when he's in the center of something, that's when it can be good. That's the problem in the world. And so even for people like me who could say, well, I thought I was doing my best to follow the Lord and live by faith, I could still be affected by sin in other people's lives. So even if stuff happens to me that's not fair, and I was a Melissa, I think of your testimony when you were a little girl and you were a believer and there were some bad things that happened to you even though you were a Christian and you had Jesus in your heart. But it wasn't that God did those things to you or made those things happen to you. There were other human beings living separated from God, separated from goodness, who were living evil. And they brought that. It affected your life just like it's affected all of our lives. So whether it's our own sin that affects us or it's the sin of other people, including generations from way back, we still experience the consequences of people's decisions, whether they were good or bad, even from years and years ago and generations past. So that to me was a huge thing that you said, that when God, who is good, is in the center of something, anything can be good, even if it's really difficult. And that's the only way that you will ever find goodness in anything. And what a sad, lonely way to exist if you can't find goodness in things, because otherwise, half of what I've been through would be enough reason for me to just say, what's the point of life? I'm just going to take my own life. But because God is good and I can have him in the center of everything, I can receive something good from everything I've been through. And it doesn't have to be
Past, present, and future.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So I agree. I think a lot of the reason that people think that God isn't good is because of bad things that happen. If we were going to make it a simplified, just boil it down to one thing. And bad things do not happen because God does bad things to people. God, and this is why, Jill, when you came on, you dropped off for a while, but this is why I started talking about free will. If God was to intervene and always change the outcome of everything, that means that he's intervening on our free will. He's intervening on human beings' free will.
Right.
And when God intervenes on their free will, I think when we think of God being in all control, we think he's just supposed to control everybody and make them do, but that's robotics. That's not human life. And when God created life from the very beginning, it had a design. It was a divine design. It was a perfect design. And it was a design where human beings could be the vessels of love and they could have a real relationship with their heavenly Father. If we don't have the ability to choose, if we don't have that free will, there's no such thing as love. There's no such thing as relationship. People have to have the ability to choose God. They have to have the ability to choose. And that's why I think, and this is totally off topic, but that's why I think that God put a choice in the garden. Because if there was never any ability to choose God or something else, then what is love? Love is a choice. I think we need to understand, like, God is good, and part of his goodness is that he gave mankind free will. And many, many people abuse that free will and choose to do evil and choose to be separated from God in their choices. And that's going to affect you and me. And it's not just everybody else, it's our own selves that sometimes choose to be separated from God. And that's why the entire world experiences a lot of the evil things that we do. I love how you grab the microphone. I'm on an important call. So that's my overarching opinion. When people come and talk to me about the goodness of God, I always end up coming down to free will. And I'm like, man, people's free will and them choosing sin is a lot of why you've experienced the unfair, the abuse, the neglect is because of sin and separation from goodness.
Another eye opener, just even this time that I've been over here is I get to see a whole different world over here.
Yeah.
Like it's nothing that resembles anything that I've ever seen in our neck of the woods. So when I start looking at, okay, how's the goodness of God in a developing nation where most of its people are living in poverty and malnourished, but I look around and a lot of these people are farmers, and this land, I'm telling you, the soil, when I start talking about sustainable development, I start looking at the soil and I start looking at what, God created the earth and he created us to plant and to reap from the ground. But we see the depletion of those kind of things in countries that have depleted their soil. But when I look out and I see the biggest cabbage heads I've ever seen in my life, and just about anything you want to grow will grow in this soil. To me, I'm seeing the goodness of God, because he is faithful. Even when the people who don't even have a relationship with him don't understand what they've done to the earth, like, he is still good and he is faithful. And I think the main thing I want to touch there is faithfulness. When we see God's faithfulness, we understand that how good he is.
Oh, that's so good.
So I just want to kind of put that into a perspective.
That's so good. And that's such a great practical example too. It's like, these are the biggest heads of cabbage I've ever seen, which might sound silly to US Americans, to anybody in first world countries. That can seem like such a small, insignificant thing. But you're right. That is the goodness. That's the goodness of God. And I even love that, like, even just the example of the fact that, like, number one, you were given life. You didn't create your own life, it was given to you. Goodness. You didn't deserve it, you didn't earn it, you didn't make it. It was given to you. You were given life. That's pretty good stuff right there. Even if your life has been difficult, you still have opportunities to change it, you know, and that, so life is a good thing. It's a good gift. And then you think about what we've been given. Like, God put us on this planet, and this planet is very smart, you know, and it's alive, it's living, it literally grows. It grows food and clothing. The earth grows food and clothing and shelter. You know, it's mind-boggling. People, like, I'm still stuck on the fact that we grow cotton out of the ground. Like, I can't get over that one. The same way I can't get over how cell phones work. You know, I cannot wrap my mind around how we literally grow fiber out of the earth. And then I'm wearing cotton, you're wearing cotton. It literally blows my mind. And that right there is just showing you somebody was providing for us from day one. Before you ever showed up here, there was a system and a design in place to feed you, to house you, to clothe you. It was given. And without God's design, we would have nothing. Nothing. Everything that man makes that's good is really provided from the foundational materials given to us through the earth.
Well, then and I always, okay, I'm a sucker for peanuts, so I'm just going to insert peanuts here. Look, George Washington Carver asking God. If you never heard the story of George Washington Carver, go look it up. Go watch a video about it. But in short, like he asked Lord for a crop. He was in I'm trying to think of what city. He was in the South, and he asked the Lord for a crop. Like, Lord, what do I need to plant? And God told him to plant the peanut. And, the peanut did a huge harvest. It was amazing. It was a huge harvest of ground nuts, peanuts, whatever, depending on what part of the world you're in. But there was no market for it. So it almost like all went to waste. And he went back to the Lord and said, why, Lord, would you have me plant the peanut and there be no market for it? And then the Lord said, you don't just make, whatever you make. You don't just eat the peanut. And so he asked the Lord to basically make a market. But the Lord gave him this download of all these products that you can make out of the peanut. And I'm telling you, the last I looked on the website, it said there was over 3,000 products made from peanuts.
Out of one little nut.
Alone. Just one nut.
No, it's
sorry.
good.
I just had to insert peanuts there. But that's the goodness of God, is like when we think that we don't have understanding and we are clueless of why in the world God would do that, and we ask him, okay, Lord, do something with it, then he comes back and he says, hey, have you thought about all these other things you could do with this one little thing? And then he just gives us this huge revelation and downloads.
Nope.
He didn't have to do that. He didn't have to share his knowledge and wisdom with us. But because we sought him and seeking him and asking him and we have a relationship with him, he's so faithful to just give us more abundantly. He didn't put us on this earth to just suffer.
Absolutely.
Like, hear me. There's somebody out there that needs to hear this. The Lord did not put you on this earth just to suffer and live a miserable life.
Mm.
All right? Jesus came to give us life and life abundantly. And that doesn't mean just money. Life abundant, it depends on what you prioritize and what you place value in. But life abundance, joy, peace, love, the things money can't buy, family.
Yes.
Family that's not your
That's
blood. Like, we live in a messed up world, and sometimes we got messed up families, but He always provides us people that surround us and lift us up and encourage us if we looking for it and if we desire it. He's faithful.
For me, when I started living for the Lord, I found true identity and I found true goodness in life. I found true purpose and meaning, which is the things that you're talking about right now. Love, joy, peace, kindness, unity with one another, real relationships, deep relationships, family, but not just blood kin family, like healing, restoration. You go through traumatizing things and God's right there to heal you and mend you up and make you stronger from it. And you're right, like before Christ, I was a performer. I was just chasing my own dreams. And then when those dreams failed me, I had nothing and I had no identity and I was a failure and I was a nobody. And that's such a terrible way to live. And it is miserable. And you're right, God did not put us here just to live in misery. You will experience some challenges. So go ahead and cowgirl up. You're going to have to get gritty if you're going to live with Jesus, because it ain't easy all the time. But it's worth it. And at the end of the day, you're going to have those real things that Jill's talking about right now. You're going to have that substance on the inside of you that's worth way more than money. And it doesn't matter what crashes in our economic system, what happens with our government. It doesn't matter who invades. It doesn't matter what we ever go through. Those are things that are unshakable. They're immovable. No one can steal them from you. No one can take them from you. And even when you are facing death and despair, you are solid on the inside and you can look forward into eternity with hope, and that's what we're shooting for. Is we want to store up the treasure that does not rust and cannot be stolen. He's just good, and there's tons of evidence out here. And I would just say that if you are in that mentality that God is not good, it's because you're focused on something that hurt you. And you are not opening up your heart and your mind and your eyes to everything else that is surrounding you, that is evidence pointing to the fact that God created this world, He created you, and He is good. Because that was me. I was a bitter young woman. I was entitled. I was selfish. My world revolved around me. And because of that, I was blind. I had so many blind spots because I was solely focused on what had been taken from me and how bitter and upset I was about it. And so my eyes were shut to all the goodness surrounding me. I couldn't see the goodness of God because I was choosing to focus on all the things that had gone wrong in my life and my family falling apart. But I needed a bigger perspective. And I promise you, young women, especially those of you who have been going through abuse, been going through trauma, been going through your family not working out, like all three of us on this podcast, we get that. We've lived that. We've been through that. You've got to take a step back. You have to make a conscious decision to take a step back, get your eyes off of your pain, get your eyes off of what feels unfair. It is unfair. That's life. You're going to have to take a step back, sit down with yourself, and start letting God give you a bigger perspective and opening up your eyes and what you're focused on to the good that is surrounding you. Because if you don't start getting your perspective on that, you're going to live angry and you're going to make decisions out of anger, or you're going to live depressed and you're going to make decisions out of depression. And in the years that I lived out of anger, I made the worst decisions I've ever made in my life, and they will affect me until the day I go to the grave, and I cannot take them back. I cannot take them back. And if you're a young person, you have a different opportunity. Don't live out of anger and depression and being upset because you hate your step parents and you're mad that your family, whatever it is. There's lots of people out here that have been through very, very horrible things, especially at a young age. So you have to make a decision within yourself, young women, that what are you going to do about it? And you're not going to be able to get into a very good situation with it without God. So that's got to be the first step, is in your heart. How do I draw near to God? I need to draw near to God. Step number 1. And from there, I need to let him open up my heart and my mind, get my eyes off of all the bad things happening to me, and start getting my eyes on him and what he's speaking to me.
Yeah, let him be the center.
Mm-hmm. Let him be the center. Yep. Let him be the center.
Just because there's going to be people who are like, oh, I'm not a new Christian and I've been walking with the Lord for a while, but I still got bad things happening. And there's still times, and it's like, is it normal for me to be angry at the Lord? Is it normal for me to go through seasons that are dry, seasons where I don't understand? I'm like, yes. I just want to touch a little bit on that, just because like the goodness of the Lord is still in the midst of that nasty, dirty season, even after you've been walking for a while. Like, you're going to have times when you feel hopeless, like your feelings, oh my gosh, they're the biggest liar. You're feeling hopeless. You're feeling alone. And then the Lord still orders your day. The Lord's still giving you guidance and direction. And even when you're like, I'm done with you, Lord, why are we doing this? And then you wake up the next day and you're like, thanks for not quitting me, Jesus. Because in the moment when we feel angry and frustrated because nothing is going how we planned it, nothing is moving, man, it all comes down to trust. And I hope that, we're going to cover trust in another time, because that's a deep subject. It's a heavy one. Still learning. You got to trust and give away different parts and compartments. But I just want to say, even when we're in the deepest, darkest seasons, even after we've been like walking with the Lord and still going through healing, it's a process. And you will see the goodness of God at every turn, in all the little things, not just the big things, but the little bitty things. If you're looking, you have to be looking, and you have to have your eyes diverted, come up for a breath in that difficult season, and just take a moment and ask, all right, good, where's that good God? Where's he at? And it's like, oh yeah, I woke up this morning.
Exactly.
Your mercies are new every morning. I get a reset button. But no, I mean, I just, people tend to think like, just because you've been walking with the Lord for a while, and even if you're, and even when you're like, oh, I'm stepping out in faith and running after the Lord, it's like we think, oh, okay, it's going to go right. It's going to go easy. It's going to be smooth. I find that the deeper I go in my relationship with the Lord, the more that I get to know him, the more that I figure out I don't have a clue who he is. I don't have a clue how he really works. I don't have a clue what this life is really about and what's going to happen after this life. But I do know is that he continues to reveal his goodness in every single season and situation. And it's enough to give you hope. So it's the little things that you see in the goodness of God that gives you hope to keep going on, to press forward and fight the good fight. And
we don't give up.
Enduring. So
we don't give up.
Keep on.
Give up. It's going to be worth it. Okay, ladies, this has been fun. This has been fun. I'm glad that we can come to somewhat of a disagreement, to somewhat of an agreement on the hot dog thing. I was concerned that maybe it would affect our friendship if we landed on really different things, but maybe this is why God brought us together, because we can enjoy the same kind of food together. Um, Yeah, so I look forward to having more conversations with you guys in the future. We'll continue to grow the podcast. This is basically a trial run at the same time that it's episode 1. So there's a lot that we don't know and a lot that I'm basically testing for the first time. It's supposed to be streaming live on Facebook and YouTube right now, which it is not because I don't know. I tried to do it and it didn't work. So this will be posted. It'll be posted on Spotify. By the time you're hearing this, it'll already be posted. And like I said, if you have a company, a business, a product that you want to be advertised, you should think of me and think of the Grace and Truth podcast. Okay. We love you guys. Thank you so much for joining us. Y'all don't hang up yet. I'm going to stop the recording, but y'all don't hang up. Okay. Love you guys. Good. Y'all could say bye if you wanted to. That would
Bye. I thought it was video recorded, so I just did
it's
this.
both.
Ciao.
It's both. So it's fine. We'll learn the process.